Hey, everybody. Happy Ethicsverse Day. Welcome to the Ethicsverse, the coolest place to be, every Thursday at noon Eastern. We got a real treat for you today. We are talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and the bottom line. We are going to dive in with a couple of quick announcements. If you like the new look of what we're showing here today, let's get some emojis going. But here's our link tree. You can find us everywhere online. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow our page on YouTube where we put all the best clips up. Definitely follow us, our company page on LinkedIn as well, where we take all the best features throughout the week from our Ethicsverse webinars, from our weekly podcast called the Ethicsverse, and get some more insights there. So check that out. Today, we're going to be giving away 5 copies of Mita Malik's new book, Reimagine Inclusion. This is debunking 13 myths. This is an international bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller, New York Times bestseller. This book is phenomenal. She was on the podcast recently, and I cannot recommend this book enough. So appropriate title for appropriate book to give away today. So there you go, 5 for those of you who are who are participating most in the chat. We love giving away books here. I don't even like making money. I just like giving away books, in case you can't tell. So we're gonna give away 5 of those today. Quick little plug of the ecosystem. Look at this amazing quote. Read that quote. That's from an actual client. Our award-winning ecosystem is ripping through the marketplace. So if you're looking for an enterprise-wide disclosure tool that can help crowdsource risk intelligence at scale, push insights out to the point of risk, and you're sick of old tools that were built 15, 10 years ago, you want something next gen, it's worth taking a look. So you can go ahead and scan something or go to ethico.com and book a demo. And then these are all the books that we have, right? We have all these different books that we love to give away from a bunch of thought leaders in the ethics space, and the compliance space, and the human resource space. So if you're interested in that, you can scan that code, and we're starting to give away books if folks want to book a demo. So there's a number of books that if you win today, you can choose from, but there's a lot of great ones out there. Christy Grant Hart's new book is going extremely well. Mary Shirley's book is, ripping through our marketplace. So check these out. A lot of great things going on. A couple of great podcasts we want to highlight. Well, I don't know if they're great. I'm on 2 of them, or I'm on 1 of them, I guess. But the one in the middle is 31 Days to a Better Compliance Program. Tom Fox puts out a phenomenal podcast every single day. It's like 5 to 10 minutes with some great tips. So scan that QR code and check that out. And our friends over at the GWIC ladies, the Great Women in Compliance podcast. If you have not listened to that, you need to. So our job is to pull the future forward, right? 10 years from now, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is going to be commonplace. Our job, or your job, is to pull that forward and make the future your reality now. The best way to do that is to get new insights from things like this and from podcasts. So I encourage you to check those out. We're still giving away our free year. So if you want to de-risk your transition and explore a new tool that's going to help you drive that culture of integrity forward, drive that belonging that allows for all those positive externalities that come along with the world's most ethical organizations, check out our offer for a free year of service. So like I said, I don't even like making money. I just want to make workplaces better and give away a bunch of books. Next week for my birthday, hope you come for the best party, the best Ethicsverse episode of the year. On my birthday, we're going to be talking about nudging out retaliation and using behavioral science to drive a culture of integrity into our organization. So that's going to be a lot of fun. You know me, I'm Nick. How's it going? Chief Servant of Ethico. And we have the one and only Jeremy York. So Jeremy York is an expert in operations. He's an expert in human resources, and he's a DE&I expert. And so what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about how we can operationalize DE&I and really start getting some of those benefits that not only are from building a workplace where people feel a lot more belonging, but how those things can translate into an expansion of the bottom line. So let's give a nice Ethico round of applause for Jeremy. Welcome, brother. How are you?
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. Really good here. Wow. I wish I looked as good as that avatar on that slide. That is some great piece of animation. That's for sure. But thank you so much for having me here today to talk a little bit about sustainable IEDB strategies. I have a lot of people who come to me and ask about, hey, we're looking to get DEI programs, things like that started where we work. And what does that mean? Like, where do we even start? Some people will say, hey, maybe we should start with doing a a employee resource group, or maybe we want to do a training. Well, those things are great, but those are things that I say are fruits of the labor of a DEI strategy, right? Of looking at what that might be for us. So what I always like to say is, hey, where are you right now with your DEI strategy? Where are you? Are you somewhere, in the beginning? Have you even started yet? Are you in the middle? Like, if you had to pinpoint where you were in being able to deliver, these DEI initiatives, where are you? Because that's going to help us be able to understand where to start. Because a lot of times we sometimes put the cart before the horse, so to speak, right? And because we are always thinking about developing, a strategy for DEI. We know that everyone's talking about DEI, why it's important, why companies can benefit from it, and how it can help us be more competitive. But we don't always understand that there is business impact on DEI. And anytime that we have something that's going to impact the business, we first have to have some type of strategy, right? A strategy that's going to help us be able to attract the best talent from across the country in a world where we can typically work remotely or work at a hybrid situation, or where we're fighting for top talent and those niche skill sets, where we're looking at being able to reduce turnover, where we want people to actually come and actually stay with us and work and contribute, where we've created environments that help them grow and develop not only their career skills of what they want and their career paths, but also themselves as a human being. We want that. And we also want to go out there and say, we've got other market share we want to be able to capture too. And this is what a DEI strategy can help you do from a business standpoint. I hear from a lot of HR professionals that are out there that say, how do I even get my leadership on board about trying to do something as it relates to DEI? Well, first we have to understand we got to talk their talk, right? We've got to talk dollar signs. We've got to talk about impact. We've got to talk about return on investment. And that's what we're able to do to get them hooked. But first, we have to also understand that they're going to want to know about a strategy. So if we talk about them and you get them hooked on why DEI is so important, more than just a right thing to do, right? But it actually has business impact, that we can begin to create and draft a strategy or a plan. You think about the reasons that we have maps, or as we today have our GPS, because, we have to know where we're going, right? And that GPS or those maps is like a strategy. It outlines exactly where we're headed, what turns we need to make, what's going to be the fastest and most effective route, how we can avoid accidents. And that is what that GPS does. So think about the strategy when you're thinking about creating this for your DEI strategic plan. Think at it as that map or GPS that's going to help us to be able to navigate what we're doing. But just like what any other kinds of maps, what is it? Well, maps have to be accurate, right? They have to be relevant to the area we're going. You can't give me a map on how to go to, I don't know, let's say Miami, Florida, when I'm trying to get to Wichita, Kansas, right? That map's not going to work for me. I'm going to end up someplace that I'm not supposed to be. And that's what this important part of having a strategy is that it provides that roadmap for us, right? We also have to know.
Quick question for you. We got
a
question from Lori. Hey, Lori, thanks for this question. She said, how inclusive are most DEI programs/strategies? Are disabilities also considered to be part of it? Great question.
They are. And when we're looking at these strategies, we're looking at all elements of DEI, and we should be, right? It's more than just race and gender. I know that's the first two things that most people think about when we talk about diversity, but it's way more than that. We're talking about things like people who have disabilities. We're talking about invisible disabilities when we're talking about those kinds of things. We're talking about people's cultural and ethnic backgrounds. We're talking about all of these things, because these are what make us special and unique. And all of those diverse kind of components is to help us create that inclusive environment that you mentioned, right? Where people feel like it's okay for me to be me and I'm different from other people we're working on or I'm working with from that standpoint. So yes, as we're creating a strategy, we definitely want to make sure that we're looking at other types of classifications or groups of people other than just race and gender from that standpoint. So where do we get started? Well, here are some questions I think you've got to ask. Where are you? Where are we going? What do we want to do with this strategy? Why are we even implementing DEI to begin with? How are we going to get there? And are we getting there? So those are questions we have to kind of keep in mind as we start looking at that. We have to start looking at things within our organization and ask ourselves questions like, we have those elements that are missing? You know, are there areas that need attention as far as it relates to DEI? Are we heavily focused on men and not women? Are we heavily focused on women and not minorities? Or what might that be, right? Where do we want? And it could be just like with the question, do we need to make sure we're paying special attention to people who have disabilities and including them into that makeup, right?
So, quick question. So 2 slides ago, you said, you know, to implement this plan, you need the commitment and support of leadership. Where do you see folks fall flat in terms of getting that leadership endorsement? Is it like, how do they struggle in tying these kinds of initiatives to those goals and to those kind of OKRs that are governing what the leadership thinks is most important for the organization?
Well, going back to what I said earlier is that they miss being able to talk the talk, right? Being able to communicate how this is going to impact the organization. Unfortunately, a lot of leadership, they're not interested in what they consider to be the touchy-feely kinds of things, right? Unless we can have some type of data that shows that, creating a great culture that's very inclusive impacts the organization positively. Having DEI programs or initiative impacts the organization positively. And being able to show what does that translate to? Is it because we're more productive? There are studies out there that say that, organizations who embrace DEI initiatives are 25% more productive than other organizations that are not. We look at organizations that embrace things like inclusiveness and empathy, and they're more productive and has a stronger impact on the bottom line. So we have to take this data that supports what we're trying to do and illustrate that to leadership about how it's going to turn into positive impact on the organization. And usually that means dollars and cents, right? People might say, well, how do you put a price on DEI? Well, it's the impact that DEI has on the organization through absenteeism, through productivity, through retention, through cultural kind of components. Those all relates to dollars, right? If we have people that are exiting the organization at a rapid pace, we're spending a ton of money in replacing them, right?
Yeah,
as opposed to saving that. So
yeah, and I would add to that, don't let the difficulty in trying to quantify these second and third order impacts that stem from a credible program like this prevent you from incorporating those impacts in your persuasion path to obtain that leadership buy-in. You just have to make a couple of conservative assumptions around those areas of turnover or engagement or productivity or whatever else Jeremy just talked about. I'm not saying it's super easy. We're not picking up, apples off the orchard floor, but it is obtainable and it is quantifiable with some basic assumptions. I got another quick question here from Lori. How do you address the argument that the best person should be hired, not someone who fits the DEI strategy? So that's kind of an argument that we hear a lot, or that I think people who take these ideas for initiative, these ideas about initiatives like these to leadership, they're often met with arguments like that. What strategies do you have to kind of to deal with that type of an objection?
Yeah, and I don't think that there is necessarily anything wrong with that thought process of we should always hire the best person, right, of who they are. I think that's important. but are we actually getting the mix and diverse candidate pool that we actually want that reflects our workforce? I think that's where it comes into play, is that yes, we want to have the best, but all of our candidates, do they look the same? Are they from the same area? Are they all the same socioeconomic background? What does that look like? Because the perfect fit doesn't necessarily mean that it is, a particular person of a background, et cetera. We've got to widen the actual net that we're casting to ensure that we're going into diverse environments. We're going to where diversity is. I always hear a lot of times, well, we can't get any diverse candidates to apply, or we just don't have diverse candidates. And I ask, well, where are you going to find the diverse candidates? Are you going to where diversity is? Right? And sometimes we have to step outside of that comfort zone that we have into areas where we know diverse populations exist, and partnering with other diverse organizations within our area if we want to drive those people into the organization as potential applicants and potential employees. So I don't know that there is, like I said, anything really wrong with that perspective of hiring the best person. We always want to, but we also need to be cognizant of what is the right person. Is it really based on experience and skill set? Or am I, as the hiring manager or the team, saying that the right person is someone who I feel more comfortable with and that is more like me because I'm used to working with people like that? And it's that type of bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious, that can keep diverse people out of the organization by saying, well, the right candidate or the most qualified candidate looks just like me, has the same background as me, et cetera. So we kind of have to be careful about that as well.
That's great. Listen to this comment from Christy. How's it going, Christy? Tone from the top is something that we hear a lot in compliance. In DEI, you need tone from the top as well. Ideally, the DEI leader/team answers directly to the CEO to signal the importance and priority. And this is something I've seen a lot of TikToks about recently of, I saw this one that comes to mind, and this woman is a, chief diversity officer. And, the title said, how you're a diversity hire. And she was kind of, poking fun at her actual plight, that she's not invited, she's invited in for all the pictures, but she's not invited in for any of these strategic decisions. The power that she hoped to have that implicitly, presumably came along with that title, she's not having, and the impact that she wants to have, she's not able to push that out into the organization. So, how does someone avoid that, or how does someone, create the circumstance that I just shared in that comment, where, that direct line to the CEO or that direct line to the board is established and that access is there?
Yeah, and that's true. The tone has to be set from the top and has to be supported by the organization in its overall operations and its overall business strategy. Unfortunately, there are these folks that are brought in for diversity officers, et cetera, that are really tokenized, right? It's a token to make it look like we're doing these things. And this is one of those things where we have to pay attention to. That's almost what it sounds like, Nick, that you're talking about. Like, she's there for all the pictures and for all the important things, but she's not necessarily being brought to the table to make decisions about the business, et cetera. That sounds like she's tokenized to me. Yeah. So what we have to do a lot of times is that we have to educate from our perspective. Sometimes we have to educate leadership on DEI and get them bought on board, et cetera. But once we are, doing that, we need to get them signed, sealed, and delivered that they're going to support these initiatives. And what does that mean for the organization, right? And sometimes it's educating them. Sometimes people aren't ever going to change, and you're not going to be able to make a difference with them. And so you've got to kind of look at, what you can do with limited means within that kind of silo that they've put you in. So I think for the big part of it is that we have to sometimes educate them, get them up to speed, get them bought in, sign them on all of that, and then get their commitment. And then here's what's hard. And this is where a lot of people aren't comfortable, and especially within DEI or even HR, et cetera. We're not comfortable holding the CEO and other leaders accountable because they're at a higher level than we are. And I say, no. we do that. That is part of our role, is that if we have these strategies and initiatives and we're charged to do it, we have to hold those CEOs and other leaders accountable once they've agreed to support or do these things. And we have to make sure that we're doing it. Because if we're not going to be able to, move forward and progress the way that we want to progress.
I think that's a great point. I think, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. That's a very famous quote that I came up with. But we have to drive that change forward. And if we're put in these positions, we need to take advantage of those positions, and we need to drive that accountability forward. It's never comfortable, or it's rarely comfortable to hold people accountable, but it's kind of our job. You know what I'm saying? Listen to this question: How DEI may be challenging? How might it be a challenging task for leaders in relationship-based cultures versus rule-based cultures? So these are kind of two different sort of sides of this continuum: a rule-based culture versus a relationship-based culture. What strategies, just off the top of the dome here, would you share for someone to navigate on either ends of that spectrum?
Well, I think DEI is a relationship-based effort. Because it's all about people and human beings, and we strive to want to have those kinds of connections and things with people. So, if you are a relationship-based culture and you're explaining what you're trying to do and the impact of the people and then what it looks like for the business, I think you shouldn't have as much pushback as you would in a rule-based kind of culture. I can tell you, I've been in many DEI kind of trainings where it's been more of, hey, this is an initiative we're doing and everyone has to get on board, more rule-based, right? I've got people in those trainings that are pushing back, challenging everything. They think that they're being, kind of smart in the way that they do it. But I love it because it gives us an opportunity to identify the people who are in the organization that might be, not on board with this, and also kind of help us understand what kinds of resources we need to provide to that person. Now, hey, are we going to change everybody's mind, Nick? No, we're not. People aren't going to change unless they want to change. But if we can push people to understand that this is part of our culture and this is how we're going to work here, and if you don't get on board, you're probably going to have a difficult time being able to, be happy and do your job here the way you want to do it, because this is our culture. This is what we want. Now, what I've also found in those rule-based cultures is that, people also feel like that they're having DEI kind of pushed at them and they're being forced about it. Well, that means that we have to change our delivery and the way that we're delivering them. And instead of making it like, this is what you have to do, this is right, blah, 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 we have to talk about more of what's the reality of this and why this is important. And we got to make it personal for them. Let them see that they are a part of this diverse community themselves, because most of the time, the people who push back the hardest are the ones feeling like that they're being excluded from this diversity kind of conversation when they are part of it as well.
Well, I think that's actually an extremely salient point you just made. I think this whole thing really hinges on the inclusivity. Like, who doesn't want to feel belonging at work? Who doesn't want to feel belonging at the, at the group level? This book that we're giving away from Mita, she was on our podcast. I'm not sure if I mentioned that or not, but she has a really great way of describing like what inclusion is, or like what it's not. And like the opposite of inclusion is when you're in junior high and you're sitting on the side waiting to get picked for kickball, and like everybody else is getting picked from you, before you. Like, I've had that feeling before. I was not like despite what you may think, I was not like a really that great at kickball. But that feeling, who wants an organization where people are feeling left out? I don't. I want an organization that has people, putting their God-given gifts to work and feeling comfortable doing that. Like, how are we ever going to unlock that magic? Yeah. People feel on the outside of something. How is the mission of your organization ever going to be achieved if people don't even feel like they're part of it? So, I mean, to your point, I think a lot of the pushback comes from people who are kind of feeling sort of excluded. And I think what the whole concept here is that this is a Big Ten concept. There's a place for everybody here. And if we can activate that belonging and people can feel part of this thing, well, now we get all those benefits that come from the diverse perspectives and the benefits that lead to more productivity and faster growth and, lower turnover and higher employee engagement. But it starts with that, that's like the mortar of the bricks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what, this kind of helps us move into this next idea of, we've got to engage our team, our leadership team, and the people that are going to be at it. But we have to actually, part of our first phase is actually looking at, assessing where we are. Right. We have to understand as we're putting together this strategy, where are we? So we have to collect data, not only from our internal resources, but external resources. And we've got to, maybe do something like an employee survey to understand where, what people think about different initiatives. We've got to look at, that kind of information, because by assessing where we are, it allows us to really be able to define the business case of what we're really trying to do. If we know that we've got a good leadership team behind us, and we've got people that are assessing where we're at, we can create this business case so that we can then be able to understand what are the things that we need to do, such as engaging the right people and actually putting together this strategy. Who's it going to be? A lot of people think when we talk about like a DEI strategy that it is HR's responsibility or it's the chief diversity officer's responsibility, et cetera. And I say, no, it is everyone's responsibility. And that's why when we engage the stakeholders, we have to have people part of this from all levels in the staff at all types of positions within the organization. They have to be the ones that we're actually engaging. Because if we engage these people, then we begin to understand what is the why behind what we do. Now, I'm a big fan of understanding the why, where we start with why. And we start to ask those questions. Why do we need diversity? Why do we need a strategy? Why do we need it now? What's different? What's going on? Because this will help us be able to really define what those goals are specifically. So I'm going to ask you this question, Nick. I'm going to ask you this question. Why do you think organizations institute a diversity initiative?
I think there was probably a drive from the people within the organization to, fix an injustice that they saw. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times it's that. A lot of times is, this is everyone's doing it, and we know that that folks from the millennial generation and Generation Z expect this from us, and if we want to get them to work for us, we have to do it. See, the problem with that is that there's no passion behind it. It's not. They don't actually really believe in it, right?
Passion, don't pander. I mean, that's pandering. That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Again, it's almost a form of tokenism that leads to these ideas of, well, let's bring someone in. We'll kind of make it look like diversity is important to us, but it isn't. It's not important to us.
On that point, I think a lot of the bad rap that DE&I gets right now is driven by this disproportionate, pandering that's going on, or the greenwashing, or the inauthentic, like you said, tokening of roles like this. Like, if there's not an authentic drive to build a culture of integrity, well, then any attempts are going to be seen, like, you can see through those. You know what I'm saying? We are extremely adept, I think, today, definitely more than our grandparents' generation, at like seeing through the BS. Like, we can see what's authentic and what's not authentic. And it's probably because we're just bombarded with so much stimulus. And I think if there's a genuine push to create a culture of integrity, or there's a genuine push to stamp out retaliation, or there's a genuine push to build authentic inclusion and diversity within the organization, I think people within the organization can see it and feel it. And when it's not, it just turns into this like really stale joke, and it kind of turns into like, it's kind of insulting. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. You see, leadership from like in the past, right? They would tell employees what to believe, and what would employees do? They'd believe them. Right. Mm-hmm. But the generations that we have in the workplace now, and the way that the world has changed and how we have access to so much information, the generations, the people that we have are asking why. They're asking, show us what's behind the curtain. We want to believe it. How is this impacting? They're asking those things. And I think that, leadership has to adapt and realize that employees now want to know much more than they did before. Right. There's that old saying, ignorance is bliss. Right. Well, not for the current generation we have in the workforce. They want to know what's going on, and they will find out if you truly are supporting DEI initiatives or if you're not. And see, this is why it's important that all of these DEI strategies and conversations aren't done in a vacuum, right? We have to garner broader feedback from the people who are actually out working for us. We need to know what they believe in, what they want, what they see from a DEI perspective, and really be able to get collaborative and figure out what these things look like for us, right? We have to be able to have those people help us be able to write this strategy as we pull together the team and what that means for us. Because if we're not working together on what that looks like, we're going to fail, because part of this whole initiative is to make our current employees, and not only the ones we're going to hire down the road, but our current employees, how do we make them feel like they're more included, right? That they are part of an inclusive environment.
I mean, listen, there's a massive deadweight loss in our economy, and it comes from employee disengagement, right? The global or our national employee engagement level is something like 69%. So companies are paying out 100% of salaries, and they're only receiving back 69% of effort, or people are only pushing the gas pedal down, about 70%. How are you ever going to get more of that, more than 70%, if people don't feel actual belonging? Or put it a different way, if you think back to your own career, when you've been working on a project or working in a particular company, where you felt really engaged, or you felt really like a deep resonance with the organization's goal or the organization's mission, right? Like when you're super bought in, how much more than 70% are you pushing the gas pedal? Probably significantly more. And so, all to your point, all of that falls directly to the bottom line. And that belonging is increasingly more important in today's generation than it was, again, relative to my grandfather's generation. When my grandfather came back from the war, he wasn't like trying to find an organization where he had deep belonging. He was trying to get a job and buy a house and, live that American dream with the white picket fence and all that. Things have changed, prioritizations have changed, and it is a strategic move for an organization to recognize the changing landscape and address that changing landscape, or change their tactics in response to that changing landscape in an authentic way. But again, we can't greenwash our way through it. It can't be inauthentic. It has to be organic, and it has to come up from the ground.
Right. And so think about this, Nick, that question of how do we engage that other 30%, 31%, if you will? How do we get them to, buy in, or how do we get more of that engagement out of them? Well, it's really kind of a simple action or simple thought or process. But what's hard is getting people to actually put this into place. And it's really just involving them in things like decision making, right? So, as we think about this strategy, and this is true for any strategy, not just DEI. I mean, it applies to every strategy. It's about getting people involved in crafting it. So many times these strategies are made up here by this upper echelon of people, and they don't get the other buy-in. If we get the folks who are out on the floor every day, the folks who are dealing with our customers every day, our middle line managers who are managing our staff every day, if we begin to get their input on things like, timing, resources, and budget, what role they're going to play, what kinds of things are a priority for us, these action items, if we can get them to really be in as part of that, and also help us create things like our DEI mission and vision, our goals and our strategies, that is how we increase that level of engagement. Think about when you as an individual participate and you really feel part of that team because you're in the know, they value you, you have a role to play, you do it, right? And it's the same thing for this, being able to get folks pulled together and understand what they are doing and how they are going to do it. We have to be able to ensure that everybody knows how they're going to be playing into all of this. And this is the big part that comes into communicating the plan, right? And this is imperative, is that everyone understands that if we really truly want to make a sustainable DEI plan, we have to know how to communicate it, what we're communicating, how we're going to approach it. We need to be transparent. We need to be open and honest. We need to make sure that we're illustrating the commitment to doing this, the changes that we think that it's going to be. And it's not just a one-way kind of action where we're pushing communication down. We've got to be bringing communication up from those we're working with that are out there.
Got a
So
great question here for you. How
yeah.
does one drive a true DEI strategy when nepotism is rampant in the workplace, especially when leadership is complicit in the nepotism? How would you
Yeah,
navigate
that's a
that?
hard one.
That might be
That's
a
a
hit the
hard one.
eject button situation. Just kidding. What do you think?
Well, I've seen organizations that they love to hire family members, and they've hired all kinds of family members, family members reporting to family members and all that. They didn't have any policies or procedures around that. From that standpoint, I've seen it where it was very much ingrained, where people were in, workplace relationships. And I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's going to be very challenging to be able to, initiate and put in a DEI plan or a strategic plan unless you can get everyone, leadership and everyone in the organization to really kind of buy into why are we doing it.
Yeah.
So it's changing minds, really, in that kind of scenario.
Persuading. Yeah, it's persuading. I got another one for you. Ready for this? This is DEI is something that all orgs are pursuing these days. How do you check the real integrity of the DEI program versus implementation just to get a competitive edge from a strategic standpoint? If actually implemented with honesty and integrity, then hotline complaints, for example, on racism should automatically be reduced instead of them being on the rise. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and that's perfect because it really is all about tracking and measuring. Right. So if we don't have ways to track and measure our success, track and measure the impact that we're having on the organization, then it's not going to help us. And that is how we kind of, get through some of those pieces. So I'm a big fan of where we go in and we do surveys and we ask people. So, we'll do a survey in the beginning of something like this, find out what our areas of measure are, and then we'll go back and do another survey after we've started to do some of these and implement some of these strategies that we have part of the bigger strategies. What are these action items? And then go back and be able to measure with all of that to see, are people feeling better? Are they feeling worse about the things that we're doing? What does that look like from a way of measure? We'll also be able to tell a little bit if we're actually impacting things the way that we want to. So if we're looking at making sure that there's honesty and integrity in all of this, a big part of it is being transparent about what we're doing. And that means that we have to share results, even if they're going in the opposite direction. We have to share that with people and talk with them a little bit about it and get that, out in the open. We have to encourage storytelling. As you said, if there's, people calling in on a hotline, well, let's start getting people to feel more comfortable telling their story about their experiences, right? About that is maybe we can have people start telling their stories about microaggressions and what that's meant for them and helping people understand what that is. So I think really it's about being able to understand how we are going to, track and, and measure what we're implementing and what we're doing. That's the biggest part, in my opinion.
Listen to this hack from Chris. Hey, Chris, this is great. So short weekly one-on-one meetings between leaders and employees are a great hack. Employees who get this are 3 times more engaged, but only a third of the workforce has a rhythm or a cadence like this. It makes perfect sense that these one-on-one meetings lead to a greater sense of belonging because they are bi-directional in nature. You're sitting across the table versus the one way, not just performance coaching, but reciprocal feedback and support. I mean, again, this is a knowledge work economy. Most of us are not standing in front of a machine press, pulling a lever or pressing a button that is stamping out widgets. We're putting ourselves into our work. It's increasingly important and more important than ever that we're engaged and we feel that kind of belonging because it takes that in order to really activate our gifts. And it really takes that for us to put the effort forward that the company is relying on us for, or that we're relying on our team to provide.
Yeah. We know that people need to feel that the role that they're performing in an organization makes a difference and that they're doing good work and they're committed to something bigger and greater. They need to understand how they fit into the role fits into the overall organization. But I will tell you, I agree with that 100% about these meetings. right? There are, I guess I've been fortunate because, I've come up through HR department ranks and working in learning and development ranks, et cetera, where most of the people who I reported to or worked with, we did these regularly, right? Of course, we should be doing it. It's best practice. But a lot of organizations that I go to as a consultant and work with them, I'm asking them, are you having a regular staff meeting? Are you holding one-on-ones and things like that? And they are not doing them at all. Yeah. And I can't tell you how shocked that I am that these people aren't doing these things. I'm like, well, how do you disseminate or communicate information to your people? Oh, we do it via email. Okay, how impersonal is that, right? You're not building relationships, and that's a one-way method of communication. But when we can get together in these meetings, what's that?
People read emails, huh?
Right, exactly, right? But if we can get together in these meetings and where we can be across from each other, we've got the realness of our humanity there, and we're able to have conversations, we're able to have that two-way communication and talk about, what's going on and be real. And we get to see all of the other elements of communication, which are our non-verbals, the way that we interact. Right? Most of communication isn't necessarily what we say, it's how we say it and what we demonstrate when we're saying it there. So I agree.
I want to share another quote I came up with that's gotten some traction. People might not remember what you say, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. And I think that's right. And I think if we're having those kinds of conversations and we're connecting with people, I of course stole that. That's a joke. But if they don't feel a connection, and they don't feel like they can talk across the table, then they're not going to get anywhere, Yeah.
Do you know who said that, Nick? Whose quote that is?
Eleanor Roosevelt, maybe?
It's actually Maya Angelou, I believe.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
I believe it's Maya Angelou.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Yeah. Listen to what Christine said. Christine's on fire as usual. It's also helpful if one of the organizational goals encompasses DEI in a broad sense, allowing departments to mold their deliverable into something that makes sense for the type of work they do. Each department can operate DEI in ways that are relevant to the work that they do. It's a great point. When employees see what it looks like when DEI is woven into the business process, it often connects on a deeper level. And that's, again, what we're talking about. We're talking about an actual connection. We're not just talking about a connection to some broad, amorphous goal. It's a connection to the organization and the way that organization moves. And does that resonate with me? And do I believe those values? Is there an overlap between my organization's why and my own why to where I feel like I can really unleash because I'm part of this thing? If we don't feel those things, listen, the cost of changing jobs is lower than it's ever been. Labor mobility is higher than it's ever been. It's not a big deal for someone to go on Indeed and find a new job and in the next week be sitting at the same desk in the same room with a new laptop from a new organization with a new email address. You understand what I'm saying? This is not like you have to move towns anymore to find work. So it's up to organizations to recognize that this is a two-way exchange, right? This is not, we're not operating gulags where people have to come to work in it every day. Ethico folks, I would appreciate if you came to work tomorrow. But my point is, nobody has to do any of these things. It's all voluntary exchange. It's all a voluntary engagement. And there's two sides to the puzzle. There's two sides to the relationship. So organizations would do well to recognize what their customer, the employee, values and create the circumstances for them to succeed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think how I approach that is organizations have to start seeing their people as human beings and not just some expendable commodity. And I feel like in the past, people have been available. And so they feel like, oh, well, just fire them, I'll get somebody else. So they've been an expendable commodity. Well, people are human beings, emotional beings. They want relationships. They want to feel important. They want to feel rewarded. They want to feel that you care about them and that their work actually is appreciated, that they're doing for you, even though, yes, you're paying them, but it's more than that, right? It's more than just showing up to work every day. It's about feeling a part of something bigger. And that's what this workforce wants and needs and expects from us. Now, as an organization, if we're not willing to have that paradigm shift, we're going to continue to struggle moving forward because we're not going to be able to attract the right people that we want. We're going to find ourselves, always underperforming because we don't have the people that we need. And so organizations have really got to, kind of grasp grasp that concept that these people who work for us are human beings. And it reminds me of someone said the other day, don't forget that these resumes that people are sending to you, that they're actually people.
Yeah.
And I think that it hit me really hard, because it's like, yeah, we'll go through and we'll scan through a resume, we pass through, we don't see them as a people, we see them as a piece of paper. We're not thinking about all of the things that are attached to that individual in that resume.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Christine also mentioned this. Exit interviews are also pretty helpful. And when you think about exit interviews as an opportunity to get customer reviews, like if you're selling a product, you're I'm sure combing through your Amazon reviews to see how this is resonating with the marketplace, and you can see it all over the place where organizations are responding to bad reviews or answering those kinds of questions, and they use it as a feedback tool to improve their product offering, right? Well, if you're not capturing feedback from customers who are leaving your organization, customers of course being employees, if you're not capturing that unfettered feedback when the fear of retaliation is gone, well then how do you know if it's working? And somebody asked in the chat, what would be a best practice to measure impact of a DEI program? I think I'd love to hear you answer that, but that's a great place to start looking for establishing kind of a control or like a foundation that you can reference over time to see, are people leaving my organization because they don't have belonging, or they don't feel belonging, because they don't believe our commitment to a culture of integrity, or they don't believe our commitment to increasing the diversity or the equity across the board. You can measure that stuff over time, and that's really a great place to start to look for qualitative information to confirm the progress that you're making in your initiative.
Yeah, and what's unfortunate about that is that a lot of organizations do not do exit interviews anymore. Right. They have stopped doing that as a practice. I'm a huge fan of exit interviews. I think it's important to be able to understand the employee's experience on what maybe kept them there for so long, or maybe what kept them there for a short period of time, or what their experience was like. What do they think about the organization? How did we treat them? How do they feel about us, viewing the employment relationship? All of those kinds of things that you can get in there. So I agree, exit interviews are a great tool to be able to see what's happening. But in addition to that, I think another way of measure are stay interviews, right? We can do stay interviews with employees and find out, why are you staying? And if they are staying because we have a great culture, or I feel like I belong, or, I feel included, or it's transparency, et cetera, that will help us be able to get the right kind of data as well, on what employees are telling us as to why they stay, and if our work is actually, from a DEI standpoint, is actually positively impacting the employees from that standpoint. You can also, as I said, do the surveys, the employee surveys that you could do to be able to help measure from that standpoint. And what we call pulse surveys, where we might just have one or two questions that we send out periodically throughout the year just to kind of measure the pulse of employees. So I think, as we're looking at DEI, if people are looking at it as some black and white ability to be able to say, is it working? Is it not working? That's not what it is. It's more of all of these shades of gray and the movement that we have in about when we're dealing with people. It's not so cut and dry. We have to be able to kind of look at all the data and analyze it from that standpoint.
Right. Speaking of exit interviews, the one and only Wendy Badger, hey, Wendy, she said, isn't it crazy? Wendy just leaves it better. Even the comment section of the Ethicsverse. I think exit interviews have a place and a purpose, but they're often too late. The person is on their way out and may be leaving with bad feelings. I like to do stay interviews to your point, Jeremy, where we find out why people are staying within the organization, what they like, what they don't like, and what they would like to see change, with the caveat that this may not be possible, and other questions. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What are we doing well? What could we be doing better? Those kinds of questions, if at a base level, at a subconscious level, convey an actual authentic commitment to hearing feedback and doing something about it. Obviously, you have to kind of carry that forward and respond to those things and do things. But it's such a great way to get that feedback and show this commitment to building this culture of integrity and building a workplace where people can feel like they belong, and one that values people as human beings, not as labor units or things, as you said, Jeremy.
Yeah. And when we talk about like this whole tracking component, there are some more technical kinds of ways to track, and when you're finding what your tracking mechanism might be. And, it doesn't have to always be so high tech. It can just be, some of the same things we've relied on in the past. But one of the things to think about from a tracking tool is that if you have an HRM system or something like that, it can help you be able to track some data too, especially if we're trying to increase diversity within our employee base, have people self-identify, things of that nature. There are some great resources out there that have dashboards and, task management and all these kinds of charts. But you know what? You might be at a position to where that's not something you can afford, and that's not something within your budget. And I'm like, but we can always find ways to measure things. The important thing about all of that is that we're always reviewing on purpose, not because we have to, but we're reviewing on purpose because we want to see if we're working, if this is working. We want to see if we're making a difference. We want to see if employees are feeling the impact of our strategies and our labors. We need to understand that and understand how we're engaging people to get this feedback. So I want to say that more than anything is that we have to review on purpose. And this all goes back to the reasons why we're doing all of this, right, Nick? Like, if we're not passionate about it, if we don't believe in it, then we're going to see this as a major task when we should be seeing this as a great opportunity to be able to make the organization better.
Well, and your organization is affected by it, right? Like, there's definitely excess voluntary turnover that's actionable. There's definitely disengagement within your organization that's actionable. There's definitely too much retaliation going on in your organization. So are we going to be paralyzed by those things, or are we going to use those as opportunities, to Jeremy's point, to start to change our world? And, it's funny when people say, well, we don't have budget for exit interviews, for example, or we don't have budget for this kind of an initiative. Well, it's like, do you have budget for the level of disengagement within your organization? If you're paying 100% of salaries and people on average are only pushing down on the gas 70%, is that in your budget? What about the voluntary turnover? Do you have the budget to onboard all these new people and take them through their J curve and spend the excess 6 to 9 to 12 months it costs, depending on their level, to get them on board? These are all silent killers within the organization that, if we are scared to articulate during our persuasion path to get what we need, if we're not articulating those things and tying those down to the why or the things that our leadership cares most about, well, then no wonder we're not making any progress. My point is, the value is there. We're talking about this because this does affect the bottom line. This is not like bright-eyed, bushy-tail stuff. These are things that actually matter today. And again, it's on us, the people that are in these seats and entrusted in these roles. It's on us to change the reality and change our circumstance so that our organizations can take advantage of this opportunity that's in front of us. Absolutely.
And I think that the more that we begin as organizations, the more that we begin to see our employees for more than just workers, right? And we see them in their authentic selves, their whole selves, and understand that they have families, that they have, other commitments outside of work, that they have goals, they have aspirations, they have, things that they want to accomplish and achieve. The more we can see the reality of what we need to do to interact with them and engage with them, and how we need to shape the world of work for people like that as well. But we have to look at it with those open eyes and not think that we're going to try to make people fit into what we think is what we want. Because right now, the employee has the upper hand. As you said, Nick, you mentioned it earlier, people can go and just change jobs and it's not a big deal. Like, they can just go. Absolutely. And this is it's different for a lot of leaders and organizations where they've had the upper hand before, and now it's in the hands of our people, of our employees or potential employees from that standpoint. And so that's, what I said earlier was that when we look at these kinds of things, it's more than just the right thing to do. We know it's the right thing to do, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger. It's got a huge impact on the way that we just do business and the way that we work with people. And I'm really big, and I know I keep saying this a lot, but one of my big focuses is just the humanity of the worker, the person, right? The individual, the employee, getting people to see the humanity of those things. So to show more empathy, to allow people to be their authentic selves, and to allow people to feel like what they do makes a difference with all of that.
I love it. So where do we start? Where, if you're coming in and you're talking to somebody, or somebody is on this webinar and everything we're saying is resonating with them, they see the value in it, but some of the light bulbs are not on at the top. What is the playbook that you would recommend for them to kind of get started and, begin this DEI journey? Because, and as you're thinking about your response, I think it's important to recognize that, like, this is probably, like everything else, not like flipping a light switch and then it's done. This is an iterative process that there's always room for more improvement, just like your health, or just like, anything else that you're building. But where would someone really get started, and what kind of frameworks or steps would you advise for someone to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit?
Yeah, well, the very first step is to have a conversation. It's to engage in some dialogue with leadership to start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Ask them, hey, have we ever thought about this here at this company? Is this a conversation that we need to have? What are our thoughts? What are we doing? We just got to start somewhere. And I say it starts with a conversation with those leaders. Ask them if it's important to them, if they feel like it's something that we need to build into our business strategy, and you might get some of them that have no clue what it even means for us. And so that's the big thing, is like, we don't really know what they don't know until we start asking them. And it's kind of aligns itself when I mentioned about holding people accountable. This is our way of starting the conversation, of holding them accountable to say, this is a topic that we should be having a conversation about, and where do we go with it, and what do we do with it? For a lot of folks, you'll really learn a lot about your organization's leadership by their response to you trying to engage them in this conversation. And, if it's something that they're going to support, or they feel like you should, or if they have no idea what it's about, or what they should be doing, or why we're even having the conversation. So you may have to do some education that, but that's the first place to start. Once you start with that conversation, you can determine what the next steps are, as far as, where do we need to start moving this? Do I need to explore it more? Do we need to engage with, outside consultants to work with this? Do we need to start talking about a plan? Do we need to start talking about goals? But that's really where you get started, at the most basic level, just a conversation.
Yeah, and back to your map, I think you have to have a vision in mind. We are all equipped with this tool called our minds, and our minds are a natural goal seek mechanism. And I think if we can start to craft a vision for what this could look like, well, it's going to provide some clarity for us to not only communicate that better, but it's going to provide some clarity in terms of like what that destination looks like that we can start working toward. I think what I would add on as well, Jeremy, is most leaders have a handful of objectives that they're focused on for the year, for the quarter, or whatever. And if we can understand the why and understand what's most important to the person that we're trying to convince, then it becomes way easier for us to kind of pick that lock and tie the benefits that we can quantify, from whatever initiative we're trying to push, tie those benefits directly to those things that are most important. That's how we can start to speak somebody's language, right? When someone feels like, oh, wow, they get it. Wow, this person understands what's most important to me. And they can see that this is not just another thing that's being added to the plate, but rather it's something that can be a tailwind to help, propel them toward the goals that they're super focused on. The odds of us getting the endorsement are way higher, right? If it feels like it's coming out of left field, or it feels like it's in conflict, or it doesn't feel like it's just another item, if it feels like it's just another item on the priority list, well, then we're probably going to start hitting our head up against the wall and probably not get the traction we need, and definitely not the endorsement we need for whatever initiative that we're talking about, to really take shape and really take form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I want to just kind of make sure that everyone understands, and I want to leave with this particular thought, is when you're starting this kind of initiative in the organization and you're really starting to put some action items around it, remember, start with a strategy. And when you use the word strategy, it doesn't have to be this big monster that's out there. Right. Really, a strategy is just kind of a plan of what you're going to do. Just don't come and say, well, we're going to do this initiative and then this initiative. Start out with something really basic in creating that strategy of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And utilize that, because that will keep you on point of being able to ensure that your goals are being met. And plus, it will also help the leadership team be able to see and understand what it is you're trying to accomplish. So, don't be afraid of that word. Don't be afraid of it. It's not as complicated as what people might think that it is. But just remember, that strategy is going to keep you on point.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. I feel like we could keep talking. There's some great stuff in the chat. Christina's talking about transparency. One thing I'd add on to what you said, starting small and, using that ABZ framework where I want to, I'm trying to get from A and I want to get to Z. But all I really need to do is kind of take that next step, take those small baby steps, get some early wins, and transparently convey to the organization, your commitment to this initiative. Connect with Jeremy on LinkedIn. You can check him out at Invigorate HR, and join us next week for the biggest Ethicsverse birthday party you've ever seen. We're going to be talking about using behavioral science to stamp out retaliation and drive a culture of integrity forward. Love all you Ethicuties. Until next time, take it easy.